Imagine this. It's 1963. You're an unknown band from Liverpool. Your manager has just landed you a record deal. Your producer hands you a song and says, "Trust me, this will be number one." You look at each other and you say, "No thanks, we'll write our own." Now that is either breathtaking confidence or the most spectacular gamble in pop history. And when you find out who that band was, well, I think you'll agree it was both. Welcome to Educating Isabella, Rock and Roll 101. I'm Michael, and this show exists because my friend's granddaughter Isabella, who is 18 years old, loves music with every fiber of her being, has a vinyl collection that would make most adults jealous, and once flew from New Zealand to Melbourne just to see Taylor Swift in concert, knows almost nothing about the music that made all of this possible. We're changing that, one episode at a time. In our last episode, we set the scene for one of the most extraordinary moments in music history, the British invasion of 1964, when a wave of bands from the UK crossed the Atlantic and, quite simply, changed everything. Today we meet one of the first groups through the door. They came from the same city as the biggest band in the world. They shared the same manager and the same producer, and they pulled off something that even the Beatles never managed. Their name was Gerry and the Pacemakers, and that song, the one the other band turned down, it went to number one.
Educating Isabella, hear the tales unfold. Is rocks bringing legends bold. From the riffs to the licks and the rebels call. It's the heart and soul of it all.
To understand Gerry and the Pacemakers, you have to understand Liverpool in the late 1950s. This was a port city, a working-class city, a city where the music coming over from America on the ships, the rock and roll, the R&B, the country, was landing in the hands of a generation of young men who'd grown up in the shadow of the Second World War and had absolutely nothing to lose. Gerard Marsden, Gerry, was born in 1942 in Toxteth, on the south side of Liverpool, right by the River Mersey. His dad played ukulele and sang, and young Gerry was performing for the neighbors while standing on top of air raid shelters before he was even a teenager. His older brother Freddie was on drums. By 1956, they had a little band together. Now here's where it gets fun. The band's original name was Gerry Marsden and the Mars Bars. Yes, named after the chocolate bar. And you can probably guess what happened next. The Mars Confectionery Company heard about it and, let's say, politely asked them to pick something else. So around 1959, they became Gerry and the Pacemakers. And honestly, much better name. Liverpool in those years was buzzing. There were hundreds, literally hundreds, of bands playing the local clubs. The Cavern Club on Matthew Street was the heartbeat of it all, and two bands were fighting it out at the top of the local pecking order. One of them you've definitely heard of. The other? That's who we're talking about today. In a poll run by the local Mersey Beat newspaper in December 1961, readers were asked to vote for their favorite local act. The Beatles came first. Second place? Gerry and the Pacemakers. These two bands were genuine rivals, playing the same clubs, the same stages, even crossing paths when they both went to Hamburg, Germany to hone their craft in the notoriously demanding club circuit there. Isabella, you know how Taylor Swift built this incredible community around her music, the Swifties, the whole ecosystem that grew up around her from her early days? Well, Liverpool in 1962 was doing something similar, but for a whole city's worth of bands simultaneously. There was something in the air there, something that would very shortly take over the world. Now, if you listen to our British Invasion explainer, you'll remember the name Brian Epstein, the man who managed the Beatles. Well, in June 1962, Epstein signed Gerry and the Pacemakers as his second act. He also brought them to the same producer the Beatles were working with, a quiet, methodical, brilliantly talented man named George Martin. George Martin had a song he wanted someone to record. It had been written by a songwriter named Mitch Murray and had already been turned down by pop singer Adam Faith. Martin then offered it to the Beatles, and here's the thing, he actually made them record it. Reluctantly. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and the boys were not happy. They'd been writing their own songs, and they weren't about to be pop puppets. Paul McCartney later said, quote, "We knew that the peer pressure back in Liverpool would not allow us to do that kind of song. So they dragged their feet, made their views known, and eventually George Martin relented. The Beatles version sat in the vault, unreleased for over 30 years. That song then went to Gerry and the Pacemakers. And Gerry leapt at it. He recorded it without a moment's hesitation. In April 1963, How Do You Do It went to #1 in the UK and stayed there for 3 weeks. It was then knocked off the top spot by the Beatles' own From Me to You. You honestly could not make this up. Now, Gerry's second single was I Like It, also written by Mitch Murray, also went to #1. So that's 2 from 2, and at this point, every music fan in Britain was watching to see what would happen with single number 3. For their third single, Gerry chose a song that was about as far from a rock and roll record as you could imagine. It came from a 1945 Broadway musical called Carousel, written by the legendary songwriting duo Rodgers and Hammerstein. It had been recorded by Frank Sinatra, by Elvis Presley. It was a sweeping orchestral, almost operatic ballad, and Gerry Marsden had loved it since he was a kid, since he'd first seen the show performed. The song was You'll Never Walk Alone, and in October 1963, it went to #1, spending 4 weeks at the top of the UK charts. 3 consecutive #1s with your first 3 singles. No act had ever done it before, and it wouldn't be matched for 20 years, until another Liverpool band, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, did the same thing in 1984. Now, here's where the story of You'll Never Walk Alone takes a turn that nobody could have predicted. Before the single had even dropped off the charts, it had found a second home. Anfield, the home stadium of Liverpool Football Club, was one of the first grounds in Britain to have a PA system that played the top 10 chart hits before matches. So, when You'll Never Walk Alone was in the top 10, the fans at Anfield were hearing it before every home game. And they started singing along, and they kept singing it, even after it dropped out of the charts, even after it was no longer technically current. The song had gotten into the soul of the Liverpool supporters, and it was never leaving. The accepted version of events is that Gerry himself presented a copy of the single to Liverpool manager Bill Shankly during a preseason trip in the summer of 1963. Shankly, one of the great football men of the 20th century, heard it and was reportedly in awe. He said to Gerry, and this is a quote I love, "Gerry, my son, I have given you a football team, and you have given us a song." Today, You'll Never Walk Alone is inscribed on the Shankly gates at Anfield. It's on the Liverpool FC crest. It's sung before every home match, scarves held high by tens of thousands of voices. It's been adopted by Celtic in Scotland, by Borussia Dortmund in Germany, by football clubs across the world. It was sung in cathedrals after the Hillsborough disaster. It was sung during the COVID pandemic as a message of solidarity, and it all started because a young man from Toxteth heard it in a theater as a child and decided to make it his third single. When the British invasion hit America in 1964, Gerry and the Pacemakers were right there in the wave. They had 7 singles reach the US top 40. They appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, the same show that had made the Beatles the biggest thing in America. They were the second most successful Liverpool group on the American charts, behind only the Fab Four themselves. In 1965, they made their own film, Ferry Cross the Mersey, which was essentially their version of the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night. It starred the band playing the Liverpool club scene, written partly by the creator of the long-running British soap opera Coronation Street. The title song, written by Gerry himself, became one of the most enduring love songs ever written about a city. But by the mid-60s, the landscape was changing. The Beatles were evolving at an extraordinary pace. Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper. The Rolling Stones were getting heavier and edgier. The whole British invasion was splintering into something more complex and experimental. Gerry and the Pacemakers, for all their charm and energy, were a bright, breezy, sing-along pop band. That world was moving on. They never had another UK #1 after those first 3, and by 1966 the band disbanded. But Gerry Marsden wasn't done, not by a long way. In 1985, after the Bradford City Stadium fire killed 56 people, Gerry assembled a group of musicians and radio DJs called The Crowd and re-recorded You'll Never Walk Alone as a charity single. It went to #1. He became the first person in history to top the charts with 2 different versions of the same song. Then in April 1989, 3 days after the Hillsborough disaster, in which 97 Liverpool supporters lost their lives, Gerry picked up the phone and started calling friends. Within days, he had Paul McCartney, Holly Johnson of Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and Liverpool band The Christians all in the studio together, recording a charity version of Ferry Cross the Mersey. It went to #1. All proceeds went to the Hillsborough Disaster Fund. In 2003, the Queen awarded Gerry Marsden the MBE, a member of the Order of the British Empire, for his services to charity. Not just for his music, for the way he'd used his music to help people. Gerry Marsden died on the 3rd of January 2021, age 78. Paul McCartney posted a tribute online, writing that Gerry was a mate from their early Liverpool days, their biggest rivals on the local scene, and that his performances of You'll Never Walk Alone and Ferry Cross the Mersey remain in many people's hearts as reminders of a joyful time in British music. The surviving members of his final lineup now tour as Gerry's Pacemakers, exactly as Gerry requested before he retired. The music goes on. So, what's the takeaway from all of this? Gerry and the Pacemakers were not the Beatles. They weren't trying to be. What they were was a band of enormous warmth, energy, and personality who happened to be in exactly the right place at exactly the right time with exactly the right people around them. They got the ball rolling on the British invasion, they gave the world You'll Never Walk Alone, and they showed that Liverpool wasn't a one-band city. Now, Isabella, homework time. And this one is a little different from usual. I want you to do 2 things. First, go and listen to the 3 singles. How do you do it? I Like It, and You'll Never Walk Alone. They're all on the show playlist. Listen to them back to back, in order, just as Britain heard them in 1963. Get a feel for what that run felt like. Then second, the next time Liverpool FC are playing at Anfield, and you can find that easily enough, watch the start of the match. Watch what happens when that song comes on. You'll understand something about music and community and belonging that no history lesson can quite capture on its own. Let me know what you think. For everyone listening along with Isabella, same homework for you. And as always, the full playlist is on Spotify, YouTube Music, and Deezer, linked in the show notes. Next time, we're heading deeper into the British invasion. There's a lot more to come. Until then, walk on.